here. Welcome, welcome to our final presentation for day one, or the full day of the solstice, actually, the solstice of the IM symposium, the winter solstice fire tenders gathering. I don't know which of those is the most important of that, but I'm really excited to be here with one of my windies, LeeOra Scott. And thank you, LeeOra, because it's really nighttime there. When she was thinking it was 7, I think she was thinking it was 7 her time. And here we are, it's what, 10 your time?
9 o'clock.
9 o'clock your time. All right. So we really appreciate you. And I'm going to butt out and let you go on with your story, because it's a wonderful story to hear. And take it away, LeeOra.
Thank you, Renee. So I got to pull up something here. And hello there. And so first, I just want to release some of the energy of the day. So let's all take a deep breath, 3 of them. Let's take 3 breaths and just release the day. So let's breathe in for the count of 7. 1 to 7. And release to 7. Hold for 7. And let's breathe in again for 7. And release for 7. And hold for 7. And again, let's just breathe in for 7. And release for 7. And there we go. And so I would like to open up space. And so if we want to center ourselves and bringing in the light from above, down through our bodies into the earth, coming to center and aligning with our personal magnetic north. I want to call in the winds of the cardinal winds, and I'm calling in the winds of Eurus of the east, Notus of the south, and Zephyrus of the west, Boreas of the north. Come in and hold circle with us, hold space for us in protection. Bring your light in. Then I'd like to call in Amaunet, the Egyptian wind of obscurity, to hold space for obscure wisdom and creative energy. There we go. So I'd like to give a little introduction of myself. My primary career is as a registered nurse, and that is how I was exposed to energy healing modalities such as Reiki when I was pursuing my bachelor's degree. And I eventually wanted to put into practice other healing modalities and become a Reiki master. And through my studies as a Reiki master, I fell upon Renee and Sandra Ingerman and was drawn by their energy and enjoyed their discussions and teachings on the Shaman's Cave. So I started reading books that were recommended by Sandra, and I was working on learning how to journey with the ultimate goal to just connect with my power animal. And it wasn't too long after that, I was drumming and building an altar, doing many practices that some may call shamanic practices, which I didn't know. I had no idea what I was doing or even why. It became very trance-like for me as I delved deeper, and unknowingly, I realized now I was opening up to an unseen world that I didn't know existed. And then Renee announced that she was going to be on the ship network and would be doing a wind alchemist course. I was intrigued by Renee, having liked her very much, and I loved her whistleblowing, which really called to me. And so I joined the wind alchemist course. I purchased the Wind of Spirits book and the wind whistle and the cards, and I started the course. And it was around the same time that she was also planning the I Am Symposium, and called out for fire tenders. And I really didn't know what a fire tender was, but I agreed that I would, and could participate as long as I could use battery-operated candles along with regular candles, because I work a lot and commute too. So it was something that sounded challenging to me, but I committed to doing it. So I was drumming, I was reading or listening to audio books that included other teachers like Hank Wesselman and Don Oscar Miro Casada, and doing journeys with Sandra and Renee. And I have come to realize that all these activities I was pursuing was a remembering for me, and led me to my awakening and set me on a path of discovery of my true self, and opened my life up to magic, miracles, and moments of grace. So when I agreed to speak today at this symposium, which is amazing to me only 3 or 4 years later from my awakening, I immediately became anxious, because it isn't that I don't carry myself with confidence, but it's that I'm speaking about spirituality and things like magic. And some people might think that that is way out there for them to believe, or it doesn't align with their religious belief systems. And certainly there can be fears that by exposing oneself to things of this nature makes one feel vulnerable. And to be honest, there are two things I prefer not to talk about, and it's my views on spirituality and politics. These tend to be very touchy subjects in my world, with my family and with some of my friends. So I find I have some resistance and fears about speaking about my current life, and have to push myself past that resistance and the fears. And I know that there are layers and layers of healing that I've undergone over the last 2 to 3 years to remove some of those fears, and speaking my voice in front of others as a direct result of my awakening. So here I am. I've been called. So I asked my spirit guides for guidance about what should I speak about, and what is the underlying message to my experiences. And the message just came to me through just the right teachers, those with whom I might watch on a podcast, or perhaps a book I just happen to be reading that is exactly just the right alignment and flow with what I'm seeking an answer to. So it was Daryl Anka that popped into my YouTube feed only a few days ago, and he explained that we as humans are built on a story structure that is what we remember. Like the ancient stories from the past, they stick. And so it is that my story becomes important, because my telling my story and you telling your stories, that once someone breaks a barrier to make others know it is possible, then others know the potential possibility. It's like the 100 monkey effect. One monkey did something that was different, and other monkeys saw it. And then they started to do it. Yes, we are not monkeys, but for humans, it's an expansion of our consciousness, and discovery that there's more to us than just this. I'm not who I thought I was. As our consciousness expands, our ability to see things around us that have always been there now becomes more visible. And that's pretty cool stuff. As our consciousness expands, one is able to experience the synchronicities, the abundance, the magic, and the miracles, just going with the flow. And I've been blessed to experience all these things. And so I want to explain what I mean when I say I was awakened, because I think when I say that to others and others say that to me, I'm not sure what that means. And you hear that a lot. Oh, I was awakened. I had a spiritual awakening. For me, it was an awakening of my consciousness, whereas my reality was totally altered and led me to an entire transformation of old beliefs and belief systems into new beliefs and belief systems. Everything I thought I knew about myself was altered, including the way I see the world and my surroundings. And it was later through the journey of discovery of my true self that I realized that this wasn't my first awakening or shift, but this certainly was the big one that was calling me to a greater path. I'd also like to define what is magic and miracles and moments of grace. And this is my take on it, and perhaps I'm sure others out there have other takes on it. But to me, magic is synchronicities and being in the flow. And there is also other forms of magic called white magic or black magic or blue magic and so on. And much of the magic that is to be experienced was lost in ancient times. And it's only now that we are going to be able to experience that again. Although there are many on the planet right now that are having these experiences and awakenings. So I have a few examples of magic that I've experienced. For instance, I turn on the YouTube and just the right teaching or message comes through. Like I spoke of before, but in another instance, I was concerned about all this money I was spending following this path that I was led to. I had to take many trips to Sedona and an apprenticeship that I was definitely called to. And then the apprenticeship with the Wind Clan, being 2 years apprentice, and a trip to Egypt, which was phenomenal, and then to Peru just this year. So I turned on the TV and I go to YouTube, and there's a big meme staring at me. Don't worry about money. So you can't make this stuff up. And I really realized that I need to just allow. And it takes considerable amount of faith to do that, because I spent a considerable amount of money. You just have to allow, given all the fears and scarcity one experiences in our lifetime. That always is something that, again, for me, I had to push through. And then manifestation of material things. I had a postcard that was placed in my dresser drawer of Machu Picchu. And I can assure everybody, nobody, including myself, my family, or anybody knew of Machu Picchu. And nobody had been there. And I just cleaned the drawer out a few weeks prior. And these are the kind of things that occur in my life. So it turned out that it was a calling for me to go to Peru and visit that mountain, which I did. And I did find out who put the postcard in my dresser drawer. So this weekend, I took my family to the Mall of America for Christmas, and I stopped at the Caribou, and I just happened to overrun my exit by about 10 minutes. And it was about 8 miles. I was in a daze, and my daughter-in-law was in a daze. And so I turned around and went back, and we were joking about everything was for a purpose, and who knows what reason that was and everything. And I stopped at Caribou and ordered some coffee for us. And when I got up to the window to pay the gal, she says, "Hey, do you want these 2 sandwiches? The people in front of you just drove off without them." So my son, my grandson, who was pretty hungry, he got a sandwich, and my daughter-in-law got a bagel, which she really wanted to have. And then we went to the Mall of America, and through abundance, my little grandson bought a 20-inch, I call it a character cotton candy. It was huge. And so we're carrying around this huge cotton candy. And my grandson, Ethan, wanted to go into the Sketcher store, which we'd never been. We weren't planning on going there, and we bought. So we went in there, and the lady gave my younger grandson a backpack to carry his stuff, which was perfect. And then when I went to get a drink, I wanted a water, but I got another drink, a mango. And when I got up to the counter, the lady, oh, do you want this water? And she gives me a big thing of water with my mango. And this is called flow. And this occurs a lot for me in my life. The little things were provided that made our day. And I'm blessed to experience these things. So there's other forms of magic, like when I went to Egypt and I returned, I performed a dispatchal ceremony. And when I went outside to throw the rose stems into my fire pit, I saw the image of a man's face in the cloud in the east. And it was a jovial face. And it was definitely a man's face. And I looked up and I laughed and I said, oh my gosh, I don't have my camera. Let me go in and get my phone. And I know you'll be gone when I come out. And I came out, and of course, he was starting to dissipate. But I had this knowing to turn to the north. And there was this beautiful image of this angel. And of course, I think we as humans think everything, things look like angels and you see the wings and all this, but I'm not positive about that. But it was beautiful. And there were many beings captured in that image too, including a cat-like face, a man gazing down at a woman, and a child's face looking toward the cross. And there was a second being in another cloud in the northwest that I captured. And he was like almost riding in the sky, holding some kind of staff. And the cat being was in that image too. And just in the tree line was a hawk, the image of the face of the hawk. You could see his beaks and the beak and the eyes. So it's pretty spectacular. It was Elizabeth Wood that explained to me that in ancient times, this was called blue magic. It's an alchemical, it's alchemical of wind and water. And I have no idea how it occurs or why it does, but it's pretty magical and mystic. The cat being is interesting because one would have to study up on the ancient star relatives, the Lyrans, which I believe the cat represented. When I went to Egypt, our tour group was able to be presented with Sekhmet. And many of us experienced spontaneous healing, synchronicities, and blessings. And so I don't know what all that meant, and but I do and I don't. And I am still unfolding that. And so moments of grace include many stories of birds that I've blessed with me in my presence. One is a story of the swans, and I'd like to tell that a little bit because it's the anniversary of that coming up Christmas Eve. And I was stopped with at my daughter's house to just give them a little bit of presents. And then I got on the road and I commute back and forth. And I was driving down the road and I saw this beautiful flock of swans coming from the south to the north. And I was heading west. And I was watching this flock. I'd never seen a flock of swans that big. And I I started to realize it was like, are we going to meet? I felt like these swans and I were going to come together. And we did. And when these swans flew over my car, I looked up through the window, and I'm going like probably 60 miles an hour down the road, but I look up through the window and I could see all these fluffy feathers, pink and white feathers just in the wind, and the long necks and the orange beaks. And you can't even describe that moment. But the other part of it is I felt like I entered a portal, like everything just kind of came to a stop. And then I drove out of it. And all the electronics in my car went wacko, which I didn't at that moment realize that was connected to that. but I had to pull my car over and stop the car and shut the car off because I was concerned my electronics were going to blow up. And when I got home, I explained it to my husband. He said, I think you went through an electric, what is it, like a magnetic field of some sort. So those are some of the stories and some of the things that I experience, which were pretty amazing. And that's what brings me here, because I believe that I need to tell these stories and allow other people to see what the possibilities that are out there, the future possibilities and what's occurring now. So I would like to read the opening to a book I'm currently writing, because I believe that it is very much significant to my awakening that I had in 2019 when I performed a fire ceremony. So it was in 1997, I had what many might call a lucid dream, a vision that unfolded in scenes like a movie. I was in the back seat of a compact car, and we were driving down the road. I was looking out the window and watched the clouds swirling violently all around us. And then as I looked to the horizon, I saw the clouds split open from one end to the other, from the south to the north, and miraculous light shined down through the clouds as if splitting the earth in two. I then found myself standing next to the swimming pool, and I was watching the fish jumping with joy out of the water. And in the next scene of the dream, I was in my house, and I felt an urgency to leave because something was amiss. Something was calling me, and I knew I had to go. I was alone, and I got into my vehicle, and I was driving west. As I drove further into the country, I witnessed fire coming out of the ground. There was chaos and people running and crossing the road in front of me, and it was obvious that many were in fear. And I kept driving. And as I entered the town, I knew exactly where I needed to go. There was an apartment in the back of a shop on the main street. I walked up to the door and I knocked, and a man opened the door, and I recognized him, and he gestured for me to enter and to sit and circle with a few others. Nobody spoke as he laid the disc into the center of our circle. The disc then transformed, and I saw the earth, and it was beautiful. And this is where I lose much of what transpired, as I am certain that I received many messages from the disc, that I was left to ethereally integrate. And as I watched the disc go through its transformation, I then witnessed what I was left on the disc was 5 baskets and in each basket 5 eggs. And then the man looked at me and said, "Things need to be simplified." And I woke up. I was so moved by this dream that I knew it was a vision. And at the same time, and my worldview at the time, I took the dream to be the revelation of end of days. I requested a visitation with my pastor, and I told her of my dream and my fears, and I cried and I confessed that I had given my hand to the devil, and he walked me down the aisle. And I remember her gentle smile and what she told me: "My dear, you were just a child." So the interpretation of this dream has unfolded over the course of only the last few years for me. All the elements of wind, water, fire, and earth were present, and I have now come to realize my connection to these spirits and the seen and the unseen. The fish and the light represented the coming days of Christ consciousness, of which we as humans are awakening to the realization of. Eggs represent beginnings, infinity, renewal, transformation, and the potential unfolding as we ascend into higher consciousness. The 5 eggs and the 5 baskets. If one was to look at numerology, the number 5 and 25 is symbolic across all cultures and is used many times throughout biblical teachings. 5 represents in Hinduism the 5 elements of earth, water, fire, air, and ether, and the foundation of all cosmic creation. In Christianity, the 5 wounds of Christ during the crucifixion symbolize sacrifice, redemption, and divine love. 5 also represents God's grace, and 25, the total number of eggs, represent grace upon grace, a symbol of God's abundant grace and blessings. And so on October 21st of this year, as my consciousness expands and I'm led to many teachers, I have heard these words, things need to be simplified, many times. But it was when I was listening to Robert Edward Grant's stream of speech, one in which he gave at the World Changers Summit in 2023 Vatican City, that his words resonated with me to be the truth to my vision that I have been seeking. Grant expressed that on the precipice of dramatic change affecting our world, technology is moving at a pace we have never experienced before, and the degree of complexity we face as a species, seemingly is surpassing our ability to deal with that complexity to manage it. Lack of order or predictability seems to be the only constant in these times. The hurt of one extends to many, as we are all connected, as we are being asked to look within as a world. We ask the existential question, why? And then he went on to say that as humans, we have moved away from empathy and polypathy, and it is through interdisciplinary approaches to learning to bridge the gap of what we perceive in the world as a lack of empathy, not allowing ourselves to listen to one another, that we believe to solve complexity is more complexity, when the only way to solve complex problems is through simplicity, through greater empathy, and I'm going to say the polymathic approaches, which is knowing about a lot of subjects. So I see this as raising the collective consciousness to a higher version of ourselves and sharing our wisdom with one another for the greater good of humanity. And so I want to tell my story. And I'm going to start. We have the Winds of Spirit, which you can see mine is pretty used up. Not used up. It's pretty used though. And Amaunet, I actually have notes. I know you probably can't see that, but I had taken notes when my awakening occurred. And so this is why it was an integration that had to occur for me to even understand that it was Amaunet that had played a major role in my awakening. And so I'm really blessed to have been able to put it together. But I'm going to read from her book, from Renee Baraboo's book, because I want to introduce Amaunet. And I know a lot of people don't have the book. And those who do have the book, it's on page 128. So call to this Egyptian goddess to hold space for obscure wisdom and creative energy. And mind you, too, I sometimes can't pronounce words very well. And I'm okay with that. Amaunet, whose name implies hidden one, is a mysterious primordial feminine wind deity. As the North African queen of the Lower Nile, she represents the invisible dual aspect of the creative process. The earliest indication of this mother goddess of wind dates back to the Old Kingdom in Egypt. Hieroglyphic shards dating back more than 3,500 years portray her wearing a red crown with a wind serpent around her body, which is the Egyptian symbol of divine authority. Women of ruling class held immense power during the early days of Egypt. They held prominent government positions, owned land, testified in court, conducted business, and engaged in important ceremonies and rituals. Inscription evidence shows that status was determined by class, not gender. Amaunet had a male counterpart named Amun. Together, they were regarded as the unseen protectors of the pyramid texts that revealed and communicated the will of divine to humanity. The pyramid texts found in the temple of Hermopolis provided insight into Egyptian cosmogony. There were several creation stories about the dawn of ancient Egypt. In one particular version, there was the Ogdoad, which consisted of 8 primordial deities, 4 pairs of gods, each with a female and male counterpart. This expression explains the dual nature of existence, light and dark, cold and hot, etc. These natural states were not metaphors. They represented the cosmic forces through which life-giving energy is manifested. And according to this myth, in the beginning, there was a primeval ocean, Nonet, Nun, chaos, Kalket, Kiku, darkness, Auhet, Hihu, formless, and Amaunet, Amun, an unseen dynamic force of nature. And in many myths, Amaunet is referred to as the feminine aspect of the creator god, Amun, his wife or consort. However, some earlier texts describe Amaunet as the mother goddess who did not need a father to conceive and might have been the first life-living god. Amaunet breathed life into the nostrils of all lifeless matter and then took responsibility for preserving her creations. The movement of air, wind, in the dark abyss brought forth time, giving birth to everything else that exists within. Time was measured in units of kingdoms, with several hundred years spanning each major period, and by the end of the Old Kingdom, Egypt worshipped many anthropomorphic gods and goddesses. Over the millennium, pantheism replaced polytheism. Amun was elevated to the solar god status of Atam Ra, and Amunet's position was diminished. When Amaunet breathes new life into your consciousness, be prepared for a divine, revelation. There you go. And so, now I remember earlier I said that I was doing the Wind Alchemist course with Renee, and the first wind card she pulled was Amaunet. And I don't know if she remembers that, but then I pulled Amaunet randomly on December 2nd. And it was on December 21st in 2019 that Renee was holding her IM symposium. I was participating, excited to watch all the speakers. Sandra Ingerman did the opening ceremony, and one of the earlier speakers was Lori Morrison, who had written The Shaman's Guide to Power Animals. And I hope I got that right. And she gifted us the owl. I then watched a few more speakers, but I had many errands I needed to run, and I decided that I would have to catch some of the speakers later. So I left the house and drove to the corner. And when I took the left-hand turn onto the main road, there was this beautiful bird lying in the middle of the road. And my first thought was, no way, is that an owl? Because it looked like this beautiful bird, but unfortunately it was dead, but it was beautiful. And I had so many synchronicities occurring in my life at that time that I knew that that wasn't normal for such a beautiful bird to be dead in the road. And I knew the bird was for me. So I had to cross a busy highway, turn around and come back to pull over to the side of the road. And imagine me running out into the middle of the road, stopping traffic to pick up this bird. And I took it home and I run through the house with the bird. And now imagine my husband's face and his reaction, seeing me run into the house with this bird. And I said, don't worry about it. Everything's okay. Everything's just right. I mean, it's just a bird I found. But I still had errands to run. So I ran out and did my errands. And when I came back, I kind of inspected the bird and I realized it was a hawk. So I instinctively cut its feathers and did ceremony with them, with the bird, giving gratitude for the blessing of the feathers. And I placed the feathers on my altar. And that's when the magic started to really rev up. My vibration raised up very high. And this is something that I hadn't experienced before. And I remember Renee saying, remember to ground. You can say Taba, but I wasn't ready for that. And I instinctively knew that I shouldn't do that yet. So I started to prepare for the fire ceremony for the new year. to participate with it was a worldwide fire ceremony that was going to be taking place. And Renee called out, "Have you made your talisman?" I wasn't even sure what that was, but I remembered Renee and Sandra talking about it on the Shaman's Cave. And after researching and reading the Facebook feed, I went to work and I carried pine branches. I went and gathered pine branches. I actually cut the branches off the tree. Random flower buds around the house, seeds, which is from what I understand now, is very powerful. Dried grasses, whatever I could find. And I added 2 roses, one from my father's funeral and one from my mother's funeral. The snow was pretty deep that year, and I had to dig out to my fire pit and prepare my fire pit for the ceremony. I dried out all the flowers and all the pine and all the stuff that I had. And on December 30th, which is the anniversary of my mother's death, I wrapped what I wanted to release into the talisman. Now, the emotions were pretty high for me. One must understand that from what I experienced and what I've learned as humans, it's the emotions and the intentions that I placed that day that played a part in that alchemy that occurred. Renee had asked us to be working on a life map in the Wind Alchemist course that we were doing. And we had laid out all of our traumas and our successes, among other things in our life, to identify the trends. And the traumas were pretty fresh for me and raised up in my mind and very painful. So I wrapped all those traumas into the talisman. And as I was wrapping, I could see clearly how these traumas that were chosen, and that we, my parents, and others involved in the traumas were all playing their roles. I called in a few of them, and there was one in particular I had emotional discussion with about what had occurred in my life and what I was willing to release and that I was willing to forgive. And then I called in joy and abundance and peace and wellness and prosperity for me and my family. I had the drumming, music playing, which was pretty deep. There's a story to that too. And I shed a lot of tears that night. And I placed the talisman on my altar next to this Indian angel doll that I took a photo of. And actually, I posted that on my feed today because it came up as a synchronicity today. And this I took the photo of the doll and the talisman. And the entire photo image of the doll was obscured by the divine light. It was beautiful because I felt the presence of my mother that night. And she was there. So the next day, I did the fire ceremony in the evening, and I initially had some difficulty getting the fire going. It was cold outside. It was like 13 degrees and all the snow and everything. And when I got it ready, I sat down and I started drumming and calling upon the spirits of the land to join me, calling upon the helping spirits, connecting with the fire tenders and the World Fire Ceremony that was also going on that night. And it was Meg Beeler that suggested we draw upon the stardust from the Milky Way and scattered it onto our land. And I did that too. So when I was ready, I cast the talisman into the fire. And then I drummed and I occasionally stopped to take a photo. So the next day, as I gazed upon these photos, I saw something that looked pretty cool. And I saw a shaman standing under a tree rattling. But when I posted the photo, others saw more. There was a hawk standing on a heart. And there were many other revelations in all of the photos that included images of faces. My mother's image of her face was in the smoke in one of the first picture. There was the eagle and the condor taking flight. There was a sprite. There was an angel blowing a horn, a deer, a raven. So it was pretty spectacular. And the images of the faces was like peeking out from the smoke, a man's face. They're pretty spectacular. So the fire ceremony altered my consciousness and changed my life forever. And of course, something like that, gazing upon all these images, there was no other choice but to change my consciousness. And it led me to my path, to my travels to Egypt, to Peru, my practices, including working with the winds and my soul's calling. I had hawks flying for months after the fire ceremony. And one time when I journeyed, it was with Sandra Ingerman, the hawk came in like the wind, just came in and opened up my heart space. And that's quite an experience to have. So the experiences of magic and miracles and moments of grace continue. And I continue to expand my consciousness. So just hang in there. I'm checking the time. I'm doing pretty good, actually, I think. Just hang in there because I want to read to you about Amaunet again. And this is where the magic really began. I myself hadn't even integrated all that happened in the unfolding of that last few years in 2020 and 2021. And it's only recently that I really am able to put it all together. Because this is really, if one looks at their life and starts to awaken, you will see the unfolding that occurred all the way from your childhood until the present day, and how divine it really was, this walk through everything, the good, I like to say the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so every moment is divine. That's how I feel about it. And that's what I've learned. So from page 131, I'm going to read to you. Because when I was working with Amaunet, I was also working with Boreas, the North Cardinal Wind. And so working in her book, you're working from a different cardinals, the east, the south, the west, and the north. And at that moment, I was working in the north. And here is what the north said. Amaunet may arrive as a hawk to bring forth knowledge from the ancient mystery schools. She was called upon by new kings to provide them with the esoteric wisdom needed to rule wisely. Arriving from the north, she is reminding you to set aside time and space to perform a ritual, symbolic act that will connect you to the divine, wind invocation, releasing ceremony, or food offering to the nature gods, which I was instinctively offering bird seed to the birds. I had a big pan of bird seed out in my backyard. And whenever you see a flag fluttering in the wind, you glimpse the ways in which all of humanity is moved by invisible yet life-sustaining forces. Cosmic energies are at play when Amaunet arrives from the north. Focus your attention on this timeless wind that propels itself without end or beginning. If you are feeling lost, call to Amaunet and ask her to help you find a quiet space. Always keep in mind that all things are connected through the breath of this wind goddess. And that's pretty amazing. So I've come to realize that the hawk is probably a spirit guide of mine through many lifetimes, and significant through my calling and who my true self is. It leads me a lot to understanding my true self. And so my main practice, which includes the winds, has been called to the ancient Egyptian mystery school teachings, just as Amaunet had said here, to be called to the ancient mystery schools. And my guides are Egyptian deities, and I am aligned with the energy of Thoth, who also guides me to the Hermetic teachings and the universal laws. And I have other spirit guides as well that have guided me through the direct revelation. And that isn't even all of it. But I don't have time to tell all the stories I have. So it's my hope that I'm going to manifest a book that I'm currently writing and I'm hoping to put that into print. And my granddaughter's going to help me build a website so that I can post some of these stories. And I have many, many images for people to see. And I know that those who come to visit that website will be drawn by the frequency of it. So I can share my stories. I have many fire images through fire ceremonies that I perform. So it is also my hope through telling my story that I have opened your consciousness to some of the new possibilities, because everything is possible. Everything is divine in its right time and place. And we are divine beings of light, dancing together in collective consciousness, collectively expanding. And there's good times ahead, but we got to get through the bad times. So lastly, I'd like to share some practices that I do to remain centered. It's important to still the mind, to listen to your own inner wisdom. Even if for 5 minutes, meditation can be done in many ways throughout the day. I meditate most mornings next to my altar, or I might go sit on the porch in the sun, take a wind walk. That's outlined in Renee's book. I meditate a lot when I drive because I'm on the road a lot. Simple things like cooking, cleaning, and doing our basic routines during the daytime can also bring us into meditation. Being human, that's what we're here to do. Create rituals. I'd like to suggest you use your wind whistle to center yourself. And a practice that I like to do is to bring in the light, the cosmic light, and bring that into your heart space. And then bring in the earth into your heart space and mix that light with the earth and blow it out into the world, into the community, for your family, to clean your house. And that is a very powerful practice. And don't forget to ask for what you need and what you want. Your guides, your angels, your ancestors, and helping spirits are here listening and can only help if you ask. And it's in these times especially that you need to ask for protection and ask for what you need. They're there to help you. And always be in a place of gratitude and give thanks daily and throughout the day. I have lived this way my entire life, through many of my toughest times in my life. I don't have to look very far from my difficulties in life to see that others are in more difficulties. And today for me, tomorrow for you. This is a powerful Peruvian practice called Ayni, Ayni, if you'd like to look that up and read more about it. But it's the giving and the receiving, both equally important. Be the dominant light in the room. That comes from Elizabeth Wood. It comes down to the essence of love. There's only love, and love is light. And set your intentions, casting that line out for what you want to create and manifest. And remember, your thoughts and your words matter. What you put out may not come back to you as you expected them to be. And that's happened to me. But you'll get it. Be specific if it's something you need and say now. Switch your routine up. These are all energy practices. Brush your teeth with your left hand if you generally brush your teeth with your right. Don't do everything monotonously. Switching things up will only open up spaciousness for new energies. Clear out and release the clutter in your life. I plan to clear my house out again this spring. I'm getting ready to do it. Follow what lights up for you, your passions, what makes you feel good. And be the child, open and receiving all possibilities. Engage the child that is untouched by distortions, old stories, and traumas. And finally, my greatest spiritual growth always came where my greatest resistance is. And one must push through these barriers. Don't be fearful, because remember that when one door closes, another door opens. I want to give gratitude to my family, and I'm going to cry, who have held me unconditionally in love through these last last 4 years, because my life has changed dramatically, and their lives have too. And I appreciate them so much for holding me. And I appreciate so much my oldest son saying to me, "You do you, Mom." Thank you to my family, my friends, and all that support me. The magic is here in your heart. And that is what makes everything possible. So thank you.
Are you crying?
I'm crying.
Oh, okay.
I
I'm
mean,
crying. I've been like listening to you, and earlier today I was listening to Erica, and when I had to run to the post office to mail some wind whistles because I'm leaving in a couple of days. So if you want some wind whistles, you better get your order in so I can mail them tomorrow. So order them tonight. And my friend said, "So is it worth it sitting there for 12 hours a day today? Like, are you crazy or what?" And I said to her, when I've heard the Windwalker apprentices stepping up and shining so bright, the day just went by like seamlessly, because that filled my heart the most. I've heard, a lot of these other presenters, but to see this group of people who have been studying with the wind, stepping up and stepping out, and then to learn from Louise that we're entering the period of air for the next big chunk of change, I'm beyond grateful. And I want to tell everyone listening, stay with us, because tomorrow we have another full day. And it seems like Saturday, a lot of our windies are speaking. And so they're scattered throughout, but they're some of my favorites. So thank you, LeeOra, and thank you for everyone who's been with me all day.